Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and we're taking a look today at the brand new Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. It can be happy or sad depending on which way you hold it. This is actually a pretty decent upgrade from Amazon. We haven't seen actually a real upgrade in hardware lately from them, and this one actually is. In fact, as you'll see in a few minutes, this performs better than their flagship Fire TV devices, including the Cube. So we're going to be digging a little bit deeper into what this device can and can't do in just a minute. But I do want to let you know, in the interest of full disclosure, that I paid for this with my own funds. All the opinions you're about to hear are my own. Nobody is paying for this review, nor has anyone reviewed or approved what you're about to see before it was uploaded. So let's get into it now and see what this device is all about. So let's take a closer look now at the hardware. This will run $49 as you see it. You get the device itself, a power adapter, a remote control, and an HDMI extension cable for that price. They also have an Ethernet adapter that will plug into that USB port at the bottom. That costs an additional $15. I think if you're doing a lot of 4K streaming and you're not sure about how good your Wi-Fi is around the house, hooking it up via Ethernet is certainly the better way to go, and I would recommend doing that, especially if you have an Ethernet port near your television where you'll be having this plugged in. But in my testing, because it supports 802.11 AC wireless, it's actually working pretty decently here, and I didn't have any real problems. It's a little bit larger than the 1080p Fire Stick that we looked at a little while ago, so you can see the size difference there, about the same thickness. I do recommend using the extension cable just because it takes a little bit of weight off your television to do that, and you also might pick up a little better Wi-Fi coverage with it as well. The remote control on the 4K edition is also a little better than what we saw on the 1080p version. You now have a volume control built into this portion of the controller, along with a mute button and a power button here to control your other devices. I believe it does all of that through HDMI CEC, so you can hit the power button and power up everything and tune to your Fire TV Stick automatically if your television supports that. This is an upgrade in hardware. It's got an MTK 8695 plus an MT7668 processor built in. It has 8 gigabytes of storage and 1.5 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM. It will support 4K resolutions up to 60 Hertz. It also supports 3 different HDR modes, including regular old HDR, HDR10, which is a new emerging format that you'll start seeing on some televisions soon, and it supports Dolby Vision. For audio, it does most of the digital audio formats out there that are on streaming services, and it also supports Dolby Atmos. But there are some catches with that support, especially when you're playing back your own media with Plex or Kodi, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. So that's it for the overall hardware. Let's boot it up now, see how it performs, and some of the things that you can do with it. All right, so let's take a look now and see how it performs. We have it running at 4K 60 Hertz on this display right now, so you can get a feel for how it works at its highest supported resolution. And generally, I'm finding everything loads up very quickly on here. I can pop into Plex, for example, and this is a load from start here. It's not caching a previous session here, so if I pop in here, you can see everything is coming to life very quickly, and really no lag or anything like that that you would typically experience with a lower end device like this. Netflix here was already loaded and was sitting in the background, and it just came right back up to where I left off with it last time. So generally it's a pretty nice interface and a nice experience with it as you're running around with the menus here. I did find too that it detected everything properly when I had it hooked up to my home theater setup upstairs. So I have a home theater receiver. I also have a LG OLED television that supports HDR and Dolby Vision. It correctly detected all of those things. I didn't have to go and force anything initially, but I did notice it was leaving everything in Dolby Vision, even things that didn't support that. So I did have to go into the settings menu here and go over to the display and sound category, and then I went over to display and I set the dynamic range settings to adaptive. It was on always HDR by default, and I think if you're really careful about color, you don't want that. So I put it on adaptive so that when it needed to switch into HDR, it would, but when it didn't, it would switch out. and it also made sure to get the right HDR mode selected. So for example, some things on the Amazon store support HDR and not Dolby Vision, so it was correctly switching back and forth between those when I got that set up. Another thing I set up on here was match the original frame rate. That's just a personal preference, but I think if you're watching a film that was shot at 24 frames per second, having the TV switch into that mode properly will give you a more authentic experience, at least based on what the director was looking for. So you can do a couple of tweaks here and there, but I think the big one here is the dynamic range setting, and I would hope maybe in a future firmware update that Amazon has it set to adaptive by default. But this really speaks, though, to some of the consumer confusion out there regarding HDR modes, and this is an example of how having all these different standards is forcing manufacturers to just default to one of them just to prevent consumers from getting stuck while using these products. So we've really got kind of a mess brewing here with all these different formats. We'll have to see, again, what happens with this as some of these new modes make their way into more televisions this year. I did find, though, that Dolby Atmos audio worked correctly, at least with Amazon Prime Video. So Prime's Jack Ryan series here supports Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos. And when I loaded up that show, all of that stuff activated. I was getting Atmos through my home theater receiver and Dolby Vision on my television. However, at the time I'm recording this video, Netflix did not work properly with Atmos, but I'm sure at some point they'll update their app to make it work in the near future. And like the prior version of the Fire TV stick, there is also voice control on this one, so you can hold down the microphone here and say, "Show me the weather in New York City tomorrow." And you'll get all of the same A-word functionality that you would experience with other Amazon voice-controlled devices like the Echo. On this one, of course, you get visual feedback along with the verbal feedback. You can even use it to tune your security cameras as well. But one of my biggest gripes with the Fire TV remains, they are having a spat with YouTube and have had an issue with them for a long time. So as a result, there is no native YouTube app on Fire TV. You get this generic icon here. This is essentially a bookmark. And when you click on that bookmark, it goes out to the Silk web browser or Firefox, your choice, and it loads up the lean-back interface of YouTube.com. So what we're looking at here is actually just a web wrapper. It does function fairly similar to how it might on set-top boxes, but if you are a fan of 4K 60 Hz content on YouTube, you're going to be disappointed. Because when we load up this video, for example, which is a 4K video that I shot at 60 frames per second, it's only playing back at 30 frames per second. I had similar experiences with 1080p content as well. So if you like that 60 frames per second stuff, you're not going to get it all that well on here. And I'm seeing occasional drop frames with this as well. So generally, the YouTube experience on the Fire TV is pretty poor. And it's something that could be improved if these companies just got along a little better, and unfortunately us consumers are paying the price for that. But one thing this new stick does better than the old one is live TV watching. One of the issues I had with the prior edition of the stick was that when you were in apps like the HDHomerun app that interfaces with their network TV tuners, you would see a lot of wavy lines on screen because the old stick did not deinterlace things properly. This new one does. So live TV looks great on the HDHomerun app. It also looks great on the Plex Live TV app as well. That's a nice big improvement here. And if you were looking for a low-cost way to add these apps to your televisions around the house, this one is now something I can recommend, which is something I couldn't do before. However, I do think you need a very strong Wi-Fi signal for a lot of these things to work properly. So if you don't have that, again, you might want to look at getting the Ethernet adapter, but this was a nice improvement to see on here. And in full disclosure, both Silicon Dust, the makers of the HDHomerun, and Plex are occasional sponsors here on the channel, but these are apps that I use every single day and like quite a bit. Now, one quick addition, though, is that if you have the HDHomerun Prime tuner, which tunes in from your cable system, and you have DRM protected channels, the Fire TVs are not compatible with the HDHomerun DRM feature. It does work on other Android boxes, and we'll be looking at a few that come in around this price point soon. So stay tuned for that. But this is not a good solution for DRM watching, but it is a good solution for over-the-air and non-protected channels. Now, if you are a home theater enthusiast, I think you might be disappointed with this. It is able to, of course, load up Plex and Kodi, and you can play probably some compressed movies just fine, but the Blu-ray MKV files that I like to play back had a lot of trouble. My Jurassic Park movie here, for example, which is a Blu-ray MKV, was not transmitting over the lossless audio, so we didn't get DTS HD or Dolby True HD. Dolby Atmos didn't work either. And then when I tried out one of my 4K HDR movies I have stored on my disk array, it actually switched into HDR mode, but then the screen was just green. So this is really not a good home theater solution. I think you'll want to stick with the NVIDIA Shield for something like that. So let's take a look now at some gaming. We're running the Android/Amazon version of Shovel Knight, and it seems to be running just fine on here. Like its other siblings out there, the other Fire TV devices, this one is best suited for casual games like this. But what I found in some testing is that this one's actually faster than the two flagship Amazon TV boxes right now. It's faster than the Fire TV 3, and it's also faster than the Fire TV Cube, yet it costs less money. And we found that out through a benchmark that we ran called the 3D Mark Icestorm test, and there we got a score of 8,831. Now that's about half the score we got out of the second edition Fire TV from about 2 or 3 years ago, but nonetheless it is an improvement over the Fire TV 3 and the Cube. But if you're looking to do more intensive things, again, the Shield TV is probably your best option. It is significantly more powerful than anything else on the market, including this. But it was good to see, though, that they've made some improvements in performance, because that's been one of the issues we've seen with these Fire TV boxes for a while. Even things like Grand Theft Auto here run a little smoother on this one versus what we saw on the TV3 and the Cube. So I think if you're looking to play some of these casual games, the stick might be the better way to go. You might want to get it out from behind your television, though, to make it work with Bluetooth controllers. I could see that being an issue when you're across the room, but again, not bad for gaming, although it's no longer a focus of Amazon for their devices. So altogether, I'm pretty pleased with this, at least compared to some of the other Amazon boxes out there. I think at the moment it's probably the best Amazon box they make, and it's not the most expensive either. Usually you would expect the best one to cost the most. In this instance, at least for now, this one has more features, has a better remote, seems to perform better, and I think if you are deeply invested in Amazon's ecosystem, this is not a bad choice. My issues, though, with it remain, namely the fact that they don't get along well with Google and YouTube, and that experience is not as good on here. But otherwise, I think if you are looking for an Amazon device, this is probably the one to consider, just because I think it works better than some of their other recent offerings. Until next time, this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold-level supporters Chris Allegretta, the Four Guys with Quarters podcast, Tom Albrecht, Too Much Sauce, Gerard Newberg, and Kalyan Kumar. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to lon.tv/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit lon.tv/s.